Welcome back to my channel. I'm Brian Kapke. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about how to succeed in technical sales, starting with the most important secret. But before I jump in, please consider supporting me on Patreon, where you'll get direct access to me, special content, and periodic Q&As live with me. So lots of good stuff, and I upload videos there without the commercials, so you kind of get the best of everything. Let's jump in. And before I start, I do want to point out that we're all in sales. It took me a long time in my career to realize we all have to sell, whether you're selling yourself for a job or you're selling yourself for anything. Even when you're trying to date people, you're selling yourself. So we're all selling. In this particular case, I'm talking about when you're actually focused professionally involved in technical sales, because I've been involved in that now for a few years and probably even before that, but I didn't quite realize I was actually in technical sales. So more than likely, you are involved in one way or another in sales too, and you just never really thought of it that way. I do want to point out this video is very applicable to the less technical salespeople involved in the process, because it's really more general than just talking about like whittly bits and whatnot in the technology. It's talking about really fundamental concepts. And this is all my own opinion, so people can disagree and say, that's not what I think. And especially if you've been involved in sales, you could disagree. Now, I will point out that as a technical professional in sales, most often you don't get direct quotas and you don't get commissions directly off sales either. So when I worked at Microsoft, for instance, I was in sales, but I was salaried. And then if sales went really well, I might get a bonus. If I was seen as helping a lot and they gave me a good rating, then I could get a bonus. But salespeople, the real salespeople, they have a lot of pressure on them. They've got sort of, kind of a gun to their head. Like they've got quotas. They've got to make them. They can lose their job. They don't make numbers. So it's a very different business. And I empathize a great deal with people who are in that spot. It's difficult. And it's one of the reasons I've never really gone directly into that. It's a little too stressful for me. Having said that, I think being somebody who is less directly under the gun means that I can be more objective. And that's why I'm able to kind of talk about what I'm going to talk about now, because I don't have that sort of pressure. So the first thing is pre-qualifying. What do we mean by that? Making sure we have the fundamentals before we jump into the full sales process to be successful. And that is called, it's an actual term in sales, pre-qualifying the customer. Now, I'm not following any company specifics for this. I'm just looking and saying, what have I seen that is critical to being successful? And the first most important thing I can think of is you're talking to the right people. They have decision-making power. I think most sales I've been involved that really went nowhere was because we were talking to techie people, software engineers or DBAs or somebody who didn't have the authority to make a decision to buy. So the first thing I put on my list is they got to have that authority. And I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. Secondly, they're motivated. If I need to get to my job and my car just broke down completely, I am highly motivated to either get my car fixed or buy a new one. But if everything's great and I have a car that's running, wonderfully, it's only a year old, I'm not really very motivated to buy a new car. They get it. Who gets it? The people you're talking to understand the value of your product. That's really important. And again, I'll talk a little more about that. And if you notice, this is a pyramid, right? I'm kind of building up, the most important being at the bottom, but working up. If any one of these things is not there, you're probably not going to be successful. Finally, it's affinity to your company. And I'll talk about that too. But bottom line on that is if they don't like your company before you even open your mouth, you're not going to make a sale. So let's dig a little deeper. What about this decision-making power, Brian? What do you mean by that? Well, let's separate the influencers from decision makers. And again, this is where I've seen sometimes newer salespeople who are more focused on the quotas get happy because they got someone to talk to, and you end up going in and trying to sell influencers. And the problem is influencers are not able to make a decision. They may influence a decision, but you need someone who actually has the authority to say yes and sign on the dotted line. So DBAs typically don't. I've never been in a position where I had that authority. I say, I like this, I like that. And they say, well, think about it, Brian. So again, you want to make sure you're talking to the decision makers. These are generally the C-suite. I never knew what that was until I got in sales. What's this C-suite I keep hearing about? It's the corporate executive level. This is your CEO or your CFO, financial officer, or your CIO. If it's got officer in the title, that's a good sign. Basically, you want to talk to them because they can sign on the dotted line. They approve budgets. They review them. They got money to spend, and they have the authority, whereas technical people generally don't. You kind of know you're talking to the C-suite type of person, someone who's more strategic, because they're not talking about twiddly bits. They're not saying, oh, does that perform right? If you run this thing over here and change the CPU output, does that affect? No, that's not what they're talking about. They'll be more likely to say, look, Brian, our sales have been going down for the last 3 years and our competitors are eating our lunch. We have to do something about this. How can you help us? We need to understand our customers better. We've got all these sales and we've got all this data, but we want to better understand our customers. What motivates them? Why do they buy our product versus other products? How do we help them? Or maybe they're looking at something like sales, but they're saying our sales costs are going up. Our cost of goods sold on our balance sheets, as they call their income statements, I should say, that's climbing. Why? So that would be another place where they know what the problem is and they understand like we have to solve it, but they're not talking about twiddly bits. They're saying, what do we do to solve a business problem? Finally, they have a budget. This is crucial. They got money to spend. If you go to buy a car and you get on the lot and the salesperson comes up and they say, how much money you got to spend? And you say, I don't know, or nothing. They're not going to want to talk to you, right? If you say, I got 25,000 to spend and you're in a Lexus dealership, they'll probably point you over to, the lower end cars and it won't be a Lexus, right? It's going to be something cheaper. So the budget is key. And if you're talking to the right people, they have a budget. Technical people, DBAs, myself, people like that, I would say, I don't know. We'll see what you got. We'll talk, but I don't have any budgets. I don't think in terms of budgets. I just come in and do my job. So people who think in terms of budget, that'll be your C-suite because they do budget. And then chances are they've got an amount in their head. They've planned it. If it's a really long-term, multi-million dollar, multi-year project, then they'll probably have to put it through a budgeting process. And maybe they have what's called a capital budgeting process because they need to figure out how they're going to fund it, but they'll know that and they'll be planning that in. And that's how you can really gauge, are you talking to the right people? They have a budget. Motivated buyer, a sense of urgency. The first thing I would say about that is they have a clear time frame. And I've been involved in sales where you're kind of initial talking to them, but they will say right off the bat, like, we need to get this done by year end. We need to have a POC, proof of concept, done first quarter. That's a really good sign. Yeah, it adds pressure. Oh my gosh, how do we do that? But it means they are motivated. They need to get this done. And that probably is followed by, here's our problem. Maybe we have a problem because we have major customers complaining that XYZ is happening. The data quality is bad. We're not getting things around fast enough to them. The data is out of date by the time they get it. And I'm thinking in this case, like what I'm saying, a lot of companies provide reporting and analytics to clients. So they turn it around. So they could have customers who are complaining about the quality of their analytics they're providing. And so they might want to host Power BI and turn it around and sell it as a service to the customers. Those are things they'd be looking at. Maybe it's quality of products. We're having a lot of quality issues with products going to customers. We need to solve this pronto or our competitors will be eating our lunch kind of thing. And something I see in sales sometimes too, which is a big red flag, is the customer is focused on, I want to get free things. Give us a free service. Let's do a POC, but let's have your company pay for it. Let's do this. They're looking for freebies. They're looking for really big discounts on things. That's a red flag right there. If they're serious, they have a critical problem, they're motivated, they're not usually focused on like getting things for free or cheap because they know the value of what they'll implement, the solution, will more than pay for the cost. And if it doesn't, they shouldn't be buying it at all. And I'll say that. I've said that to customers. If you go through the purchasing process and you implement the solution, it should more than pay for itself. It should either give you increased revenue or massive savings on the other end. And that should easily pay for whether it's Azure services or Databricks or whatever you're using. It should pay for itself. If it's not, then it's not a good solution and you have to find something else. They get it. What do I mean they get it? They understand the value of your product. You might think this is strange. Isn't that what we're there to sell? Actually, no. The customer really should have some sense of what you do and the value you offer. They need to learn more and you need to help them understand more values and more details, etc. But they should have a good idea of like, you're offering a great value and we need to figure out the best way to leverage that. Kind of following with that, they know where they want to apply the technology. Again, if you're talking to the C-suite, the decision makers, they know they have a problem with sales. They know they have a problem with maybe product quality. So they'll know where they want to apply it. And so if you're, for instance, Microsoft and you're selling them an Azure machine learning and Databricks or something, they'll already have a pretty good idea like, okay, that makes sense because this is what we're trying to do and this is the subject area we want to focus on. They understand the current, and I made that all caps on purpose, state of technology. In other words, they understand the value of the cloud. They understand that big data and AI is here If they're doing applications, they probably already have a good appreciation for the fact that they need to integrate artificial intelligence into apps, and there's a lot of value there. They understand the value of analytics reporting like Power BI or Tableau or something like that. Those are the kinds of things they should already get. And they understand that using cloud services like PaaS and SaaS and all these things is a better place to be than trying to do everything on premises. Having said that, if you are a legacy company that sells products that are more orientated that way, that's fine. They should at least understand, how your technology fits in and that type of thing. But for the most part, I hope we're talking about companies that are going into the future and using the state of the art technology we have now. Cloud technology is actually a decision I think that's passed. Most companies aren't evaluating whether to go to the cloud anymore. They're just trying to figure out the best way to do it and achieve the most value. And finally, you got everything before right there. You're almost pre-qualified. You're almost like, this is a good customer. We're going to sell. Great. But there can be another problem. Affinity to your company. Best place to be is they're already a customer. So when I worked at Microsoft as an example, again, many times we'd get in there and we're talking to people who already use SQL Server and C#, .NET, all these different tools. They already have Office. That's a great place to start with. Now, getting the right level is always a challenge. Even at Microsoft, sometimes you're talking to DBAs or programmers. That could be a problem. But they're already a customer and there's already an affinity there for your company. That's great. Sometimes, however, it's the opposite. They got it in for your company. They don't like you for this reason or that reason. They had a bad experience, whatever it is. And that can really work against you. And honestly, you're not going to overcome it. If they've already made up their mind they don't like you, especially say the CEO is just not like you, probably not going to happen. But if they express a positive sentiment like, hey, we've worked with your company for decades and it's been great and we're happy to talk to you now, they're affirming and not challenging. And that's a good place to be. Should they do POCs and make sure you're giving them the right solution and everything's right? Absolutely. But if they're really negative and more cynical and skeptical of things you're saying, like, I don't think you can really do this. That won't really work. And I've been in those situations. Again, you're not going to make headway. Now, mind you, it could be just a technician or somebody who has no influence or very little. But if you're getting that from the decision makers, you're in trouble. So wrapping up, it's kind of summarizing the secret here, which is probably seems a little self-explanatory, right? You'd say that doesn't seem so electrifying, but you'd be surprised how often this doesn't happen. And again, very often I've been in sales where we're not talking to decision makers. We're talking to people who like to have meetings, apparently. I've also been in situations where, yeah, you get decision makers, or maybe you don't, but they're not motivated. They're okay where they are. They're pretty comfortable. They're not going to lose their job. Then again, you may get people with that, but they don't get it. They don't understand why they want to do it. It's like, sure, we like Microsoft. Sure, it would be great to buy it. Maybe they say it'd be great to do it, but why go to the cloud? What do you got to do there? I like it the way it was. So you kind of get to that point. And again, affinity is really big. In this day and age where people tend to either really like something or really not, that's going to be a big influencer on whether you make a sale. If you're not working for one of these really large companies, that's okay too, because chances are, whatever company you work at, there's some level of affinity out there. So either you're starting from a position of neutrality, like they have not really had an experience with your company yet, that's okay. You can establish that positive affinity, or you've got some history and you can build on that and make it a better affinity, better partnership, which is what it's really all about nowadays. This is partnerships between businesses, and that's what sales is. You're trying to strengthen that partnership, help the company, help your company in sales. It's kind of a win-win when it's done correctly, and it's great. When it works out well, you've helped the customer, you've given them solutions, they're ecstatic, you're ecstatic, everyone's happy. And it really is a win-win. When you're trying to do anything else, I think you're going in the wrong direction in sales across the board. That's my own opinion. I think it should always be a win-win, and I think it can be. So that's it this time. I want to thank you. Please share, subscribe, like, leave comments. Glad to hear it, especially if you have any experience in these areas and you want to comment about your own experiences. Glad to hear that. Please share this channel with other people. Let them know I'm out here doing these videos. Really glad to see when people comment that they've been helpful. Until next time, I'm Paul and All in this together. Thank you.